The moment that changed everything, the night was quiet, but Daniel's heart wasn't. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the old photograph in his hands. A blurry picture of a man standing beside a bus stop, holding a small umbrella over a stranger's head. That man was Keanu Reeves. Daniel had taken that picture years ago when he was just a struggling film student in Los Angeles. He never meant for it to be special. Yet as time went on, he realized that moment had changed his life forever. And tonight, for the first time, he was ready to tell the world what really happened. It was a cold winter evening, 10 years ago. Rain fell hard on Sunset Boulevard. Daniel had missed his last bus after a long, failed audition. His wallet was nearly empty and his camera bag felt heavier than ever. He was soaked, hungry, and tired. No one around him cared. Everyone hurried past, eyes on their phones, ignoring the shivering young man waiting alone under a broken streetlight. That was when a simple black car slowed down near the curb. Daniel didn't pay much attention at first, thinking it was just another rideshare. But then the window rolled down. A calm, deep voice spoke. "Hey, are you okay?" Daniel looked up, blinking through the rain. It took him a moment to recognize the face. It was Keanu Reeves. Yes, the Keanu Reeves, the actor he had admired for years. The man whose movies had inspired him to chase his dreams in the first place. I'm fine, Daniel lied, trying to sound normal. But his teeth were chattering. Keanu smiled softly. "You look cold." "Come on, I'll drop you somewhere safe." Daniel hesitated. Celebrities didn't just stop for random strangers on the street. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone was filming. But something in Keanu's tone felt real, honest, simple, human. Finally, Daniel stepped closer. The rain poured harder. Keanu opened the door and handed him a towel from the seat. There was no security, no assistants, no cameras. Just the two of them in the quiet night. Inside the car, Daniel could smell coffee. A thermos sat near the console. The seat was warm. For the first few minutes, neither spoke much. The city lights blurred outside as the car moved through wet streets. Then Keanu said gently, "You're an artist, right?" Daniel frowned. "How do you know?" Keanu smiled. "The way you look out the window. Artists look at the world differently." Daniel felt something break inside him, that invisible wall of doubt he had built over the years. "I wanted to be a filmmaker," he whispered. "But nothing's working out. I can't even afford rent this month." Keanu nodded slowly, eyes thoughtful. "You know, when I first came to Los Angeles, I slept on a couch for months. I didn't know anyone. I just knew I had to keep trying. Sometimes the world tests how much you really want something." Those words stayed with Daniel, maybe because they came from someone who had lived through pain and loss and still found kindness to share. Keanu dropped him near a small diner, paid for his meal without saying a word, and told him to take care. Before driving away, he left one more message. "Don't quit, Daniel. The world needs more people who see beauty where others see nothing." Daniel stood there under the neon light, stunned. He wanted to thank him, but Keanu was already gone, just like a quiet guardian disappearing into the rain. That night, Daniel promised himself that if he ever succeeded, he would share this story, not to gain attention, but to show the kind of man Keanu really was. Years passed. Daniel worked hard, took small jobs, made short films, and slowly built a name for himself in the film community. But he never forgot that one night. He never forgot the towel, the coffee smell, or those simple words. And now, standing on a stage at an international film festival, holding an award in his hand, Daniel finally said it aloud before the world. "Everything changed for me because of one man. A man who never asked for credit. A man who showed me what real kindness looks like. His name is Keanu Reeves." The audience grew silent. Then applause started. Slow, respectful, emotional. People weren't just clapping for Daniel's success. They were clapping for a man they thought they knew, but perhaps never truly did. As Daniel stepped off stage, he felt a gentle tap on his shoulder. He turned around and froze. There stood Keanu, smiling quietly. "You kept your promise," he said softly. Daniel couldn't speak. His eyes filled with tears. Keanu simply nodded, gave him a small hug, and whispered, "Now go tell the full story." And that was how it began. the revelation of a hidden heroic act, one that would move millions. The story behind the silence: the night after the award ceremony, Daniel couldn't sleep. His heart was still racing from what had happened. The applause still echoed in his ears, and the image of Keanu standing backstage kept flashing in his mind. He couldn't believe it. After all these years, the man who had once rescued him from a dark, rainy night had shown up silently, just to remind him to share the truth. But there was something else that haunted him. Keanu's eyes, calm, kind, yet heavy, as if holding 1,000 quiet stories. Daniel wondered how many lives that man had quietly touched, how many people carried small, unseen pieces of his kindness. The next morning, Daniel sat in a quiet cafe in downtown Los Angeles, sipping black coffee and staring at the newspaper. The headline read, "Daniel Archer's emotional tribute to Keanu Reeves moves Hollywood to tears." He smiled weakly. It wasn't about headlines or attention. It was about gratitude. But what he didn't know was that this small tribute was about to open doors to something much bigger. A chain of stories that had been buried for years. A woman approached his table. She looked to be in her 40s, wearing a simple gray coat. Her eyes were soft but tired, the kind that had seen too much and spoken too little. "Are you Daniel?" she asked gently. "Yes," he replied, a little confused. "I saw your speech last night," she said, taking a seat. "You were right about Keanu. He's helped more people than anyone knows." Daniel leaned forward, intrigued. "You knew him?" She nodded slowly. "Once, years ago. I never thought I'd tell anyone this, but maybe it's time." Her name was Clara. 10 years before Daniel's rainy night, she had worked as a nurse in a small hospital outside Toronto. She told Daniel about a quiet patient who used to visit the ward late at night. Not for treatment, but to sit beside the beds of those who had no family. He never told anyone who he was. He would just listen, hold hands, and sometimes bring small gifts, flowers, books, or even handwritten notes. Clara only learned who he was one morning when a little boy with cancer recognized him. "You're the man from the movies," the boy had said weakly, smiling. Keanu had simply smiled back and said, "No, kid. I'm just someone who likes good stories." That moment stayed with her forever. As Clara spoke, Daniel felt chills. Her story connected perfectly with what he had experienced. The same humility, the same quiet kindness, the same refusal to be seen as a hero. "Why didn't you ever tell the world?" Daniel asked softly. Clara looked down at her hands. "Because he asked us not to. He said kindness loses meaning when it becomes performance. He said if people knew, they'd make it about him, not about hope." Daniel stayed silent. He could feel the weight of those words. As Clara left, she handed him a folded piece of paper. "This might help you find what you're looking for," she whispered. Daniel unfolded it after she left. It was a handwritten address: Maple Hospice Care, Toronto. He felt his pulse quicken. Maybe this was where Keanu's unseen kindness had begun. Maybe there were others who could tell the story the world never knew. Later that day, Daniel packed his bag and booked a flight to Toronto. As the plane took off, he watched the clouds drift by and thought about how strange life was. One random act of kindness had started a journey that was now leading him across countries, into the heart of something beautiful and forgotten. When he landed, the city was covered in soft snow. The air was cold but not harsh, calm, like a whisper. Daniel took a taxi straight to the address. It was a small building, simple and quiet, with faded blue paint and a wooden sign that read, Maple Hospice Care. Inside, he met an old caretaker named Paul. His eyes brightened when Daniel mentioned Keanu's name. "Oh, I remember him," Paul said, smiling. "Used to come every Sunday. Never wanted attention. He'd read to the patients, sometimes helped clean the garden. When the hospice was struggling to stay open, someone made a big anonymous donation. Later, we found out it was him." Daniel felt a lump in his throat. Paul continued softly. "One day, we asked him why he did all this. He said something I'll never forget. Because the world gave me more than I deserved. I just want to balance it." Those words echoed in Daniel's head all evening. He walked through the hospice garden, where snow covered the benches and frozen flowers bent under the cold. It felt like walking through the past, through a story built out of silence and compassion. As he stood there, a small girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, came running up to him. "Are you the filmmaker?" she asked shyly. Daniel nodded. "Yes, how do you know?" "My grandma said someone might come to tell the story about the man who helped everyone," she said. "She's inside." She knew him too. Daniel followed her inside and met the grandmother, Mrs. Olson, a retired nurse. Her hands trembled as she spoke, but her eyes were steady. "He used to come here after visiting his sister's grave," she said. "He'd sit alone for hours before walking in to help us. Sometimes he'd bring food for the patients. Sometimes he'd just listen. I once asked if he ever got tired. He said, 'Not when it's for love.'" The room went quiet. Daniel felt tears form in his eyes again. He realized then that what Keanu had done for him wasn't just a moment of chance. It was part of a lifetime of hidden kindness, built from loss, love, and empathy. As the snow fell outside, Daniel turned on his recorder. He looked at Mrs. Olson and said, "I think it's time the world finally knows." She smiled softly. "Just promise me something," she said. "What's that?" "Tell it gently. Heroes like him don't need noise, they need truth." Daniel nodded. "I promise." And as the recorder blinked red, capturing the first words of a story the world had never heard, Daniel felt a quiet warmth inside, the same warmth he had felt in that car, years ago when Keanu handed him a towel and said, "Don't quit. This was only the beginning." The letters he never sent? The next morning, Daniel woke up early in his small hotel room in Toronto. Snow had piled against the window, and the faint sound of wind pressed gently against the glass. He sat up slowly, still thinking about what Mrs. Olson had told him the night before. Her voice had carried something more than memory. It carried the weight of truth. Daniel opened his laptop and began organizing his notes. Every story he had gathered so far painted the same picture. Keanu Reeves, a man known for his movies, but remembered by the few who had seen his quiet humanity. He didn't seek cameras, he sought connection, but Daniel wanted more than memories. He wanted proof, something tangible that would help people believe that all of this wasn't just rumor or exaggeration. He decided to spend the day at the hospice's old record room, where Mrs. Olson said some documents were still stored. The room was small and smelled of dust and old paper. Boxes of files were stacked high against the walls. Paul, the caretaker, handed Daniel a flashlight. "Some of these go back 20 years, Paul said. "No one's really looked through them in ages." Daniel nodded and began searching, moving through old patient forms, donation records, and handwritten notes. After an hour, he found something. An old envelope with faded ink, marked only with initials. KR. His heart raced. He opened it carefully. Inside was a folded letter written on simple stationery paper. It read, "To whoever finds this, please don't think of me as a savior. I am not. I'm just someone trying to make peace with what life took and what it gave. If I can make one person smile a little longer, maybe that's enough. Maybe that's the balance I've been searching for." Chaos. Daniel sat there in silence for a long time. The handwriting was simple, almost hesitant. It felt deeply personal, like something Keanu had written not for fame, but for release. As Daniel turned the paper over, he noticed something scribbled faintly on the back, a list of names. He recognized one of them immediately, Lucas Moran. He quickly searched online and discovered that Lucas Moran had been a music teacher at a community school in Toronto. According to an old article, Lucas had died in a car accident 15 years ago, and oddly, the piece mentioned that his hospital bills had been paid by an anonymous donor. Daniel felt that familiar spark of curiosity return. That afternoon, he visited the old school. The building was half abandoned, but a small part of it had been turned into a community arts center. Inside, he met a woman in her 60s named Janet, who introduced herself as Lucas's sister. When Daniel mentioned Keanu's name, she smiled through tears. "Oh, him," she said softly. "I'll never forget what he did." She told Daniel that when her brother was in the hospital, she couldn't afford his treatment. One night, A quiet man had walked into the hospital wearing a cap and a long coat and handed her an envelope. He never gave his name. Inside was enough money to cover everything. I asked him why he was doing this, Janet said. He told me, because your brother taught my sister music when no one else would. Daniel's eyes widened. His sister? Janet nodded. Yes. I think her name was Kim. She passed away long ago. That name hit Daniel hard. He remembered reading once that Keanu had a sister who died from leukemia years ago. Suddenly, everything connected. The hospice visits, the donations, the quiet service. He wasn't helping strangers. He was honoring her memory. Daniel thanked Janet and walked out into the snow, feeling both heavy and inspired. Keanu's kindness wasn't just about helping others. It was about transforming grief into compassion. Every act of generosity was a way of keeping his sister's light alive. Back at the hotel, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about that letter. If I can make one person smile a little longer, maybe that's enough. He took out his camera and began recording a message to his viewers. Not to reveal everything yet, but to share the beginning of what he had learned. He spoke quietly, his voice trembling a little. Sometimes the real heroes don't wear capes or stand on stages, he said. They walk among us quietly, leaving trails of goodness behind. And maybe the best kind of fame is the one that never needs to be seen. As he uploaded the short clip, he didn't expect much. But within hours, it went viral. People from all over the world began commenting, sharing their own small encounters with Keanu Reeves, a woman who said he once helped her carry groceries, a fan who said he waited with her for a train after she got lost, a man who said Keanu donated to his late wife's charity without ever announcing it. Daniel scrolled through hundreds of messages, overwhelmed. It was like watching the hidden kindness of one man ripple across the world. But something else happened, too. Amid the messages, one stood out. It was from a user named EmilyR89 who wrote, "You're looking for the truth about him, right? I know someone who has one of his old letters. Meet me in New York." Daniel stared at the message, his curiosity reignited. "Another lead, another piece of the puzzle," he replied quickly, and 2 days later he was on a flight again, chasing not fame, but the quiet light of a man whose kindness refused to stay hidden. As the plane rose through the clouds, Daniel looked out the window and whispered softly, "You really are everywhere, aren't you?" And deep inside, he knew. This story was far from over. The woman with the last letter, New York City, was loud, alive, and restless. As Daniel walked through Times Square that evening, the world around him seemed to move too fast. Lights flashing, people rushing, cars honking. But inside him, everything felt slow, steady, and quiet. He wasn't there for fame or interviews. He was there to follow a thread, a single message from someone named Emily. They had agreed to meet in a small cafe tucked away on a quiet street near Central Park. When Daniel arrived, the place smelled of coffee and cinnamon. A soft jazz tune played in the background. A woman sat in the corner near the window, wearing a dark coat and holding a small notebook. She looked up as he entered and smiled nervously. "You must be Daniel," she said. "Yes." "You're Emily?" She nodded. "Thank you for coming." She slid a small envelope across the table before he could even sit down. The paper was old, slightly torn at the edges. Daniel's heart beat faster. He already knew what it might be. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "It was left with my mother years ago," Emily said softly. She worked as a waitress in Los Angeles. One night, a man came in, sat at the counter, and ordered nothing but black coffee. It was late. The place was empty. She said he looked tired but kind. Before leaving, he gave her this envelope and said, "Give this to someone who believes in good people." Then he just smiled and walked out. Daniel slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a folded sheet of paper with the same handwriting as before, small, careful, and deeply personal. It read, "Dear stranger, I hope you are doing okay. I've learned that sometimes the smallest acts of care can mean more than the biggest speeches. I've seen loss, loneliness, and pain, but I've also seen kindness. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that stays. If you ever feel invisible, remember this. Somewhere someone is wishing you peace." Care Daniel felt tears in his eyes. He ran his fingers over the words as if touching them could bring back the warmth behind them. Emily watched him quietly. My mom never knew who he was until years later, she said. She saw his face on TV and just froze. She said, "That's him, the man from the cafe." What did she do with the letter? Daniel asked. She kept it in a drawer all her life, Emily said. She said it reminded her that good still exists, even in strangers. They both sat in silence for a moment, the sound of soft rain hitting the window filling the space between them. "Why did you decide to contact me?" Daniel asked finally. Emily smiled faintly. "Because you're telling the story the right way, not for fame, not for headlines. You're telling it with heart. And I think he'd want that." Those words stayed with Daniel. It wasn't about uncovering secrets anymore. It was about preserving the truth. The simple truth that kindness, even when unseen, can heal broken hearts. As he walked out of the cafe, the rain had turned heavier. New York streets shimmered under the city lights. He took out his phone and read the letter again, feeling the weight of every word. Then, as he turned the corner, a man in a long black coat brushed past him. Daniel didn't see his face clearly, but something about the walk, the calmness, the quiet presence, it reminded him of Keanu. He froze, heart racing, but when he turned around, the man was gone. Only footprints on the wet sidewalk remained. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He laid the letter beside the one from the hospice. 2 different letters, same message. One written for those in pain, one for those searching for peace. He realized something powerful. Keanu didn't write these letters for attention. He wrote them to reach souls, to whisper hope where silence had grown too loud. The next day, Daniel received another email, this time from an unknown sender with no name. It simply said, "You're not the only one collecting his letters. Meet me in San Francisco." He hesitated for a while, staring at the message. Was this another clue or something more? Still, his heart told him to go. 2 days later, he was walking along the foggy pier of San Francisco, holding his camera close. The city felt different, quieter, almost watchful. He met the sender at a small bookshop called Second Wind. The man was in his 50s, wearing glasses and a brown jacket. He introduced himself as Victor, a retired journalist. "I've been following your story," Victor said. "And you're right. There's more." He led Daniel to a back room where old boxes were stacked. From one, he pulled out a worn notebook tied with string. "He gave this to me years ago," Victor said. Said he didn't want to be interviewed, but he wanted to leave something behind, in case someone someday understood. Daniel untied the string carefully. Inside were pages filled with reflections, sketches, and small writings, thoughts about life, pain, and healing. One page caught his eye immediately. It read, "Kindness is not a performance. It's a quiet rebellion in a world that moves too fast to feel." Beneath the words was a rough sketch of a man sitting alone at a bus stop, holding an umbrella for someone else. Daniel's throat tightened. It was the same image he had captured years ago. The same night, the same scene. He remembered. Daniel whispered. He remembered that night. Victor nodded. He remembered everyone he helped. That was his way of healing, by carrying pieces of others' stories. Daniel looked down at the notebook, overwhelmed. He realized that this wasn't just a collection of random acts of kindness. It was the silent map of a man's heart, drawn through moments the world never saw. He turned one last page and found another sentence written in simple handwriting. "If anyone ever tells this story, tell them not to make me a hero. Tell them to look around and see the heroes beside them, the ones they pass every day." Daniel closed the notebook slowly, feeling tears sting his eyes. He finally understood. This wasn't about Keanu Reeves alone. This was about everyone who chose kindness when the world chose noise. And as he stepped out of the bookshop into the soft evening fog, Daniel whispered to himself, "I'll tell it the way he would have wanted." The journey was no longer about discovering the man behind the kindness. It was about carrying that kindness forward. And somewhere, miles away, in the quiet of another city, Keanu Reeves smiled, knowing his message had finally found its way home. The truth that humbled the world, The sun rose slowly over San Francisco, painting the sky in soft orange light. Daniel sat by his hotel window holding the notebook Victor had given him. He had read it through the night, every word, every line, every scribble. The pages felt alive, filled with the quiet thoughts of a man who had spent his life healing others while hiding his own pain. Somewhere between the words about kindness and grief, Daniel had found something else. A short entry dated 12 years ago. I met a young man by the bus stop tonight. He looked lost, like I once was. I don't know his name, but I hope he finds his way. Maybe that's how we save each other. One small kindness at a time. Daniel froze when he read that line. He knew instantly that the young man was him. Keanu had written about that night, the night he offered him a ride and changed his life. His hands shook slightly as he closed the notebook. For years, he had carried the memory of that meeting as a private miracle. Now he realized it wasn't just his story. It was part of something bigger, a quiet legacy that stretched across countless lives. That morning, he decided to make the documentary public, not just as a film, but as a movement, a call for unseen kindness. He titled it, The Quiet Light. In the opening scene, he spoke directly to the camera. "We all know Keanu Reeves as an actor," he said softly. "But this isn't a story about movies or fame. This is about a man who chose to be human first. It's about what happens when someone turns their pain into compassion and their silence into hope." The video included interviews with Clara, Mrs. Olson, Emily, and Victor. It showed footage of the hospice, the cafe, and the bus stop where everything began. It ended with the letter that started it all. If you ever feel invisible, remember this. Somewhere, someone is wishing you peace. Daniel uploaded it late that night, expecting a few thousand views. By morning, it had reached millions. Comments flooded in from every corner of the world. People thanking Keanu for his kindness. People sharing their own hidden stories. People saying they had decided to do one good deed that day because of what they saw. News outlets picked it up. Major headlines read, "Keanu Reeves' secret acts of kindness revealed, a legacy of humility." But what surprised Daniel most was what happened next. Keanu himself finally responded, not through interviews or press conferences, but with a simple message posted online. "I'm not special. I just believe in people. Thank you for reminding me that kindness still matters." The post broke the internet. Millions shared it. Thousands wrote back stories of their own. Teachers, doctors, taxi drivers, parents, strangers, all inspired to be a little kinder. Daniel sat in front of his screen, tears in his eyes. This wasn't just a film anymore. It had become a movement. Later that week, Daniel received a small parcel delivered to his door. There was no return address, only a note inside that said, "For the storyteller." Inside the box was a photograph, an old Polaroid of the bus stop, the same one from years ago. But this time, there was something different. Written on the back, in that same familiar handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for keeping your promise." Daniel stared at it for a long time, his throat tightening. Keanu had seen the film. He had watched the story unfold, and instead of stepping forward for recognition, he had simply acknowledged it with the same humility that defined him. A few days later, Daniel was invited to speak at a university event about storytelling and empathy. He stood before hundreds of students and began his talk not with facts, but with silence. For 10 seconds, he said nothing, letting the quiet settle around the room. Then he said gently, "This silence, this is where kindness begins. It starts when we listen." He told them the whole journey. The rain, the towel, the letters, the notebook, the cafe, the hospice, the strangers who kept the truth alive. And when he finished, the entire hall was silent again, not out of emptiness, but out of respect. A student stood up and asked, "Do you think Keanu will ever talk about it publicly?" Daniel smiled. "He already has," he said. "Every act of kindness he ever did." That was him speaking. As the applause filled the room, Daniel realized something profound. He had gone searching for the story of one man's kindness, but along the way he had discovered something greater, the power of ordinary people to carry goodness forward, even when the world isn't watching. That night, as he walked back to his hotel, the sky above was clear, filled with stars. He looked up and whispered softly, "You did it, Keanu. You reminded the world what being human really means." And somewhere, maybe sitting alone on a quiet bench or walking through a city street, Keanu Reeves probably smiled again, the kind of smile that needed no audience, no lights, and no applause. Because in his world, kindness was never a show. It was simply a way of living. The legacy of light weeks passed after Daniel's documentary. The quiet light took over the internet. News channels, magazines, and millions of people online had all joined in sharing stories. Not just about Keanu Reeves, but about ordinary people who had done quiet good deeds without expecting anything in return. Something in the world had shifted. For once, the headlines weren't about drama or fame, they were about kindness. Daniel sat by his window one morning, the same way he used to when life felt uncertain. But this time he wasn't lost. He was at peace. In front of him, his laptop screen glowed, with an inbox full of messages. Letters from people all around the world. One was from a mother in Brazil who said her teenage son stopped bullying a classmate because he watched the documentary. Another was from a hospital nurse in India who started reading stories to her patients after learning about Keanu's visits to the hospice. A man from Japan wrote that he had finally forgiven his brother after years of silence, because one line from Keanu's notebook had touched him deeply. Forgiveness is just another form of kindness. Daniel read each message slowly, realizing how far one act of compassion could travel. That evening, he received an unexpected call. A woman's voice spoke softly on the other end. "Hello, is this Daniel?" "Yes, it is," he replied. "This is Lucy," she said. "I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Reeves. He asked if you'd be free to meet him." For a moment, Daniel couldn't speak. His heart pounded. He had imagined this call countless times, but never believed it would actually happen. "Yes," he whispered. Of course. 2 days later, he was flown quietly to Los Angeles. No media, no cameras, no attention. He was told to meet at a small coastal park at sunset. When he arrived, the place was nearly empty. The ocean shimmered gold beneath the fading light. Seagulls moved lazily across the sky, and there, sitting on a weathered bench, was Keanu Reeves. He looked exactly as Daniel remembered, calm, gentle, and humble. Dressed in simple jeans and a black jacket, he smiled as Daniel approached. "You kept your promise?" Keanu said softly. Daniel nodded. "You kept your kindness." They both laughed lightly, and for a few minutes said nothing. The sound of waves filled the silence. Finally, Daniel spoke. "I never thought you'd want to meet me." Keanu looked out toward the horizon. "I didn't for a long time," he said. "But you told the story the way it was meant to be told, without noise, without fame. I wanted to thank you for that." Daniel hesitated. "You changed so many lives, Keanu. The world needed to know who you really are." Keanu smiled faintly. "The world doesn't need more heroes, Daniel. It needs more people who care quietly. If the story reminded people of that, then maybe it was worth it." The wind brushed softly through their hair. Keanu turned and handed Daniel a small notebook, thinner than the last one, with a dark blue cover. "What's this?" Daniel asked. "The rest?" Keanu said. "The thoughts I never finished writing. I think they belong to you now." Daniel opened it. Inside were a few pages of reflections, fragments of sentences, sketches of people, and one full page that caught his attention. It said, "Kindness doesn't end with one person. It travels, from hand to hand, from heart to heart. If you're reading this, keep it moving. Don't let it stop with me." Daniel looked up, eyes filled with emotion. "You really mean that, don't you?" Keanu nodded. "Always." They sat together for a long time as the sun dipped into the water, painting the sky in deep red and gold. Before leaving, Keanu stood and placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Promise me one thing," he said quietly. "Anything. Don't let the story become about me. Make it about the light we all carry." Daniel nodded slowly. "I will." And then, just like that night years ago, Keanu walked away. No security, no noise, no spotlight. Just a man disappearing into the calm of the evening, leaving behind something more powerful than fame. The spirit of kindness. Months later, Daniel turned the quiet light into a global project. Schools, charities, and hospitals joined hands under the campaign Keep It Moving, inspired by Keanu's words. People shared acts of kindness, planting trees, feeding animals, helping strangers, all without showing their faces or taking credit. And at every event, a small blue notebook sat on a table, open to the page that read, "Kindness Travels." Thousands of people signed beneath it, passing it along as a symbol of shared compassion. The final entry in that notebook wasn't written by Daniel or Keanu. It was written by a child at one of the events. In shaky handwriting, it said, "I helped a man who dropped his groceries. He smiled. I felt happy. I think this is what heroes do." Daniel read it and smiled softly. He knew then that the story was complete. The world didn't need to remember Keanu Reeves as a movie star. It needed to remember him as the man who taught them that being kind was enough. Years later, when Daniel grew older, people still asked him how it all began. He always gave the same answer. On a rainy night, a stranger stopped his car, handed me a towel, and said, "Don't quit." I didn't, and neither did the kindness he shared. As he looked up at the sky one last time, Daniel whispered, "Thank you, Keanu." The light's still moving, and somewhere under the same sky, a man with gentle eyes probably smiled again, quiet, unseen, content, because the kindness he once gave had found a way to live forever.